Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
It's been 5 years, and I am convinced that COVID changed everything, which is crazy when you think about it. What we're going to talk about today is so important for us to get right if we're leaders. I think this is going to be a really important episode. Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravett.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, I'm building on this idea of a virtual workplace. I hear over and over people complain about it's so hard. We've got virtual employees. What do we do? I saw a statistic recently, 86% now of meetings in the year 2025 have at least one person who is virtual in those meetings. And so, Mark, this is a big deal to a lot of people that we're talking to. They're not sure what to do. And I think today we've got some answers for them. So I'm excited to jump into this. But I will say this, I don't think the world of work is ever going back. I'll also say I'm not sure that COVID actually started this. There was virtual stuff going on before COVID, but it was the tipping point, and a lot of people went home and now have not come back, and people are really like, what do we do here with this? So I can't wait to hear some of your thoughts today.
Well, the genie is out of the bottle, and the genie is not going back in the bottle. This is the new world, and it's the new reality. You know, many of us, I'll speak for myself here, were baptized by fire, right? During COVID. I mean, I'd done a few Zoom calls in my life, but all of a sudden, you know, your world goes 100% virtual. And it was quite an adjustment curve. And again, I just think the world of work has changed forever.
Yeah. So today we get into how do you lead a team virtually if that's your case. And we will acknowledge that lots of people have come back into the office there, if there is an office. But I think there's so much here. If we get this right, we can have unbelievable teams virtually. And I think that, you know, we've got to have a little bit of a mindset shift. You and I probably are at the front of the line and need to have a mindset shift. Maybe you even more so than me, because you love getting people in a room. There's nothing better than, you know, we're in a room together. That really is awesome. But a lot of good things can happen virtually if we understand some of the dynamics of that. And I want to see if we can debunk some of the, you know, there's a lot of angst out there right now of like, what do we do? And if we don't have everybody do you have to have them in the same building? I don't think you do. So let's dive into that a little bit today.
Well, and I have a point of view, and clearly I want to own my own bias, right? I'm an old guy set in my ways, but spent 40 plus years doing it the old way. And, I think it's doable. I mean, let me just get that out. But here's what I believe. It's harder to do it virtually. And I think there's actually data to support that. We won't go there today. We're going to talk about how do you do it even though it's hard. I think it requires a lot more discipline. I think it requires a lot more intentionality. I think it requires leaders to be far more strategic. I think it takes more time and energy than we had to invest before, but it is doable. And which is why we're doing this episode, because I still meet far too many leaders that think it's not doable. They've let the hard overcome the answers, right? It is hard, but there are answers. And that's what we want to provide some today.
Yeah, let's start with really something we talk about a lot, and that is results. I mean, we're after results here. And so if we want the best results we can, we need to understand that if we don't learn to lead virtually, we're probably going to leave some results on the table. And there's a couple of sides to that coin. It'd be easy to think, well, what if we have everybody in the same building? Is that not like we don't need to lead virtually then? And that's true if you can have everybody in the same building. But there's a chance that some of the best people that you could have to be a part of your team don't live where you live, and you may not need to relocate them, or you may not even have a building. I mean, you may have a virtual team. And so if you don't incorporate, the other side of the coin is if you don't incorporate some of the stuff we talk about today, and you just leave it to chance that we're going to have a Zoom call and get everybody together and think that we're going to achieve our best, that's probably not going to happen if you don't focus on some of this stuff that that we'll cover here. So, Mark, let's dive into this idea. I want to talk about it today.
Yeah, and I think the good news is that the principles and many of the practices that you and I have discovered and practiced over the last 30 plus years still work in a virtual world. Again, some of the specific applications are different, but I actually do not believe the core strategies are any different when you're trying to build a high performance team. So that's kind of where we want to go today and talk about some very practical things that you can do.
You said there's good news and really bad news. The bad news is it's probably going to be harder to execute this remotely. So we do need to focus on some of this stuff. So let's start. I think that if we're going to do this well, we've got to think about what I said earlier is like attracting the best people. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with turnover episode. I think attracting top talent should be our number one priority, because we would both say the team with the best players is really positioned to win. And if I've got a chance to attract talent, virtually, people in different locations remotely, we would call it, why would I not do that? Why would I not want the very best people that I could get? A lot of our team is remote, that. And we do pull them together from time to time in the same room, and that's great. But if we're not careful, we would limit what we would be able to accomplish if we just said it's got to be, people that live within 20 miles of whatever the so-called office is. Well, so I think attracting top talent should be where we start.
Yeah, but here's the cautionary note, because I don't want anybody to hear that and go, sure, of course we're going to recruit top talent, and they want to keep moving. Here's what I would suggest. If you're not careful, you will lower your standards. Don't lower your standards, raise your standards. To your point, if you're going to say we're going to do this with a camera and a computer, then are you recruiting across the United States? Are you recruiting globally? I mean, I used to try to do that when we were in offices. I wanted to interview and recruit people from around the country and around the world, because if you're trying to build a world-class organization, to your earlier point, why would you want to say we only want talent that lives 20 miles from here? Well, this new technology has literally opened up the world. So I would say a lot of people, they need to raise their standards in a virtual world.
Well,
you don't have the barrier of geography.
Yeah, we know organizations that are leveraging technology to attract better people, and so, I think that's a great point. So, so practically speaking, what would you say it takes to attract top talent in a virtual world? Well, I mean, where would you start there with that?
Well, one of the things we've always talked about is that people really do like flexibility, and they really do like choice. And so we just blew the top off the box when you have the ultimate choice and flexibility. Is you can typically work hours that you like. You can typically work locations that you choose and prefer. I just think if we're going to build a virtual team, that we make that one of the selling points, which again should help us get the very best talent in the world.
Yeah, I think if we're going to do that, we don't want to shortchange selection, though. It's so important that we spend time with the people. And by the way, you might need to get face to face for the interview part. I mean, you don't have to do everything virtually. I would be a fan of getting on an airplane and going and seeing somebody and meeting them and are the same, character and chemistry and competency things that we would talk about, other things that you'd be looking for. You get more of that in a face to face, probably in a room than you would on a screen, so to speak. So I think there's a lot of things there that we don't want to shortchange any of that. You use the word shortchange. I don't want to shortchange any of that.
Yeah. So right. Don't lower your standards and don't shortcut or short circuit your selection process. You may not only want to go see them, you may want to bring them to some location of your choosing. You may not have an office to bring them to, but you may want them to meet members of the team. A lot of teams have been involved in the interview and selection process for decades when there was physical place. Well, if you're not careful, you say, well, we can't do that. That's too hard. People decisions are too important to take shortcuts. And so do what you have to do. I will even say, and I don't know if Chick-fil-A is still doing this or not, but for decades, an individual who wanted to be a business consultant, one of the things the business consultants at Chick-fil-A have done for decades is they travel and they meet operators in their restaurants. Well, as part of the selection process, those candidates, those men and women, they came and traveled with a consultant to see what the work was like. And I would still be a fan of that, even if those people never have to report to a physical office. If you want them to experience that. Oh, and by the way, somewhat parenthetically, we had candidates that would wash out at that stage. I remember one young woman who had never traveled before. We sent her with the consultant and their flight got canceled 2 or 3 times and they got stranded in some remote city. And she came back and said, I'd never want to do that for a living. It's like, fantastic, right? You want to figure that out before the person is hired versus them sitting there going, oh yeah, I'd love to travel. I don't mind to travel. My family and I travel all the time. That'd be great. No, I've never traveled for work, but I'm sure it's just like traveling with your family. Well, certainly it's not. And so I always thought that was an important part of that selection process. So what are those things that are really going to help you select the best person?
Yeah.
Do those things.
I think as a leader, it's important for us to just pull back half step and say, what do we really want? What are we trying to do to go get these results? And I may have somebody that lives, 20 miles away or 2 minutes away, and they still may be remote. I may say to them, I need you here on Tuesdays and Thursdays for these meetings. Or I may have somebody that lives across the country that every quarter we're going to bring in and we're going to do. Again, you got to decide what you want and what the rhythm is and who needs to be in a room when. And then if there are times when they don't need to be in a room, and maybe you don't even need office space. You said that. I think that's true. You get to decide all that stuff. But I think it's important for us to remember we're building toward results. We're going toward a vision. We're trying to accomplish something. And it really is imperative that we understand our responsibility to build the very best team, the very best structure to help make that happen. So I think there's lots there.
Yeah, but let me go back to what you just said. I think it's great to say we're going to have a quarterly meeting or a monthly team meeting and you've got to come to town. And I don't care if they're 20 miles away or 2,000 miles away. If that's a condition of employment, you just need to tell them up front.
Right.
You don't need to hire them and go, oh, by the way, you need to be in this city once a month. And it's going to take you 2 days.
That would be part of those expectations for sure.
Yeah, don't do the bait and switch. Tell people up front. And again, if you change those expectations, which is certainly your prerogative as leadership, you just have to understand the consequences and the fallout. But don't become a victim of the virtual workplace. And you and I had a conversation. I don't know if you remember this or not. We were at a conference and we were talking to a CEO. And he was so frustrated because he needed to have his people in a room for a meeting. And he said, they're all virtual. And I looked him square in the eye and I said, sir, you're the CEO. If you need a meeting, call a meeting.
Yeah.
Don't become a victim of the virtual world. If that's what the organization needs, call a meeting. And he acted like that was a revelation. It's like, well, yeah, I am the CEO. I can call a meeting.
Yeah.
Now, I'd say give people some notice because you're going to have 10% of them that say, can I just call in? You're going to have 20% of them say, can I just join on Zoom? And you got to decide that answer beforehand. Like, can they or can they not? But don't become a victim of a virtual workplace.
That's right. So I love the reminder, Mark, to raise the bar. Don't lower it. Just, I think sometimes we're like, well, we'll just lower the bar and we'll have Zoom meetings and it'll be okay. But no, we're really still after results. We're chasing a vision here. Let's don't forget that part. Okay. So if we do have people on Zoom and we do have people virtual, that we're meeting with from time to time, let's jump into some specifics here, Mark. There are some things that we can do. And I think we would start with the idea of mastering team basics, right? We talked a little bit about some of these. I think it was last week or week before. But let's start there. This idea of mastering team basics, because we're going to be a team. It doesn't matter if we're virtual, we're in a room, wherever we are. really it's on us to make sure that we understand the basics, and our team is working week after week after week to get better at those. We're practicing those.
So let's just give folks a partial list to know what we're talking about with the basics. And I don't think it can start any more basic than to clarify the role of the team member, the role of the team, the role of the leader. And you've heard me share this example before of the leader who was frustrated that his team wasn't solving problems. And I said, well, what do you do? And he basically said, well, I solved the problems. And I said, okay, well, great. I don't think your team believes that you want them to solve problems. And he said, why not? I said, because you always solve the problems. So right out of the chute, there's a role clarity. Who do you want solving problems? Who do you want managing and improving performance? Who do you want doing these various things? And you get to decide. As the leader, you could choose to do everything, but then the team needs to know what they're supposed to do. And so I know that sounds really, really basic, but if you go into most teams and ask them to articulate, to write out the 3 or 4 roles that they own and the 3 or 4 roles that the team leader owns, if they have not done the pre-work of forging a consensus, it'll be a hilarious exercise.
Yeah, so we want to create role clarity. We also want to establish our team's purpose, Mark. I think it's so important for us to make sure that everybody on the screen, or they can be in a room, it doesn't matter where they are, but if we have a team, do we know why we have a team? Do we know why we've put these people together? And do we know why, Carol in Colorado is important to be part of what we're doing, and Johnny who's in the room with, it honestly, I think sometimes we as leaders forget to remind us over and over, here's what we're doing, here's why it matters, here's who we are, here's why we have a team, what we're trying to accomplish, so to speak. So that's establishing team purpose to me.
Yeah.
It would be really important, especially virtually.
Yeah. And related to that is the establishment of team goals. What are we trying to accomplish together as a team? And you and I have had this running debate. When does a team become a team? And I say it's not when they get the jersey. It's not when they're drafted. They're not a team until they share common goals, when they're working on something together, and preferably something they could not accomplish alone. That's when a team becomes a team.
Yeah, I've heard you say for years that you're not even really a team if you don't have a goal. Okay, so I think next, if you have a virtual team, again, I think these are basic to either way, but if you have a virtual team, let's make sure that we have a team scorecard. I can live in another city and I still need to understand how are we doing on the scoreboard? Like, are we winning here against those goals that you just mentioned? If we're going to have a goal, how are we going to measure that? And we need to be talking about our progress over and over, maybe more so if we're virtual, because we can't just go down the hallway and stick our head in the office and, have those conversations all the time. Sometimes it does become harder. We said that at the beginning, but I think it doesn't negate the fact that we can have a goal and we can measure it.
Yeah. The scorecard also lets you know when you need to celebrate. It lets you know when you need an intervention, when you need to do problem solving, because you're building your team life. It's around stewarding and improving the performance as reflected on the scorecard. So it's one of those basics, but a lot of teams will miss that if they don't stop and focus.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one, next team basic, we talk about it with all teams, but again, virtually here, I think this one, I've got a little nuance I want to talk about, but I would say it's to conduct great meetings. We want to make sure, really, you can't go down the hallway. Like I said, this is your opportunity. When you have people together, you need to make sure those meetings are awesome. And if you're not careful, you can just allow your meeting. I've been in a lot of bad meetings in my life. It's even worse when the meeting is virtual and it's bad. And I think there's some things that we can do to make sure our meetings are good here. We can have an agenda. We can send that out beforehand. We can make sure that we're allowing people to weigh in on stuff appropriately. And if somebody's not talking, it's easy. Everybody can hide behind a mute button, but we may need to be more specific in the way we facilitate those meetings, and maybe need to remind people that we're going to I'm making this up, but we're going to have the chat open, and we're going to make sure that everybody weighs in on this. Would you put something in the chat? And then somebody may moderate those and read them back if we need to, or we may need to send those back out after the meeting. But if we put stuff in the chat and then nobody ever looks at the chat, or we don't respect that, I think there's things that we're going to have to step it up here when it comes to our meetings, especially when they're virtual.
Yeah. So all the things that you would do in a regular meeting, you need to figure out how to do them virtually. Still, they all matter. The ones you mentioned, and there are a half dozen other things, but you need to figure out how to do your meetings really, really well. And I would say one thing to add to this list is problem solving together. Now you say that's hard. Well, sure it is. But here's the way it ideally worked in the old world, is that you only brought the hard stuff to the team. Well, I think that still should be true. The easy stuff gets handled outside a meeting. It gets delegated. It gets decided by a leader somewhere. But you bring the hard stuff together because that's actually what teams do best. They solve problems when they work on them together. And think about it. It makes perfect sense. You've got the collective experience and education and individual passions and talents, and you put all that together and your collective IQ just skyrockets. You're going to solve problems better together. And you can still do that virtually because you're only going to bring the big problems. You don't mess with the little ones because that won't play well on TV, but bring the big problems to the team and work on them together. And you'll extract maximum value from your team if you're solving problems together.
Mark, the next team basic we talk about all the time is to improve decision making. I'm curious, what would you say to a virtual team? What can we do here to improve our decision making in a virtual context?
Well, I think it's the same as in the real world. I think you have to have a mindset that as you look at your agenda, you're going to finish every agenda item. So by definition, there's a decision at the end of every agenda item. Now, there may be an actual decision resulting in who's going to do what by when, but maybe the decision is we're going to talk about this at our next meeting. Maybe the decision is we're going to delegate this to an individual or a sub-team to go work on it and make a recommendation and come back. Maybe the decision is we're going to put this in our annual planning folder and we're going to talk about it as we prepare for next year. So you ought to actually make a decision on every agenda item. Now, when it comes to what type of decision, real quick, we've talked about this before. I think we did an entire episode on this. I would say you've got 4 options. A leader has 4 options anytime a decision needs to be made. 1, you can make a command decision. You just decide. And then everybody else's responsibility is to take good notes and ask clarifying questions. So you can make a command decision. Number 2, you can make a consultative decision, which means you as the leader retain decision rights, but you're inviting others to provide input, to provide counsel. It's consultative. The third is you can seek to reach a consensus. Now, a consensus is not what a lot of people think it is. It's not like we're all going to vote and it passed 5-4. No, it's something that everybody can fully support. The decision, that is. Well, you can just imagine if you've never gone through that activity or that exercise of trying to reach a consensus decision, it's really hard to do.
You're probably going to need the pro account on the Zoom.
Well, here's the deal. You need more time, but
that's what
you
I'm saying.
Only want to bring those decisions that have extreme circumstances or high degree of complexity. And those are the ones that you may feel for the better of the organization, you need a consensus decision. Now, remember, it's the leader that's putting these in these various categories. So if over time the team can't reach a consensus decision, the leader can take it back and make it consultative. And the leaders can say, and I have said, and other leaders have said that use this approach, I really did want us to make a consensus decision here, but because we've been unable to, I'll make the decision. Thank you for your input. And they consider all of those conversations as input. But there's a fourth option, which is a delegated decision. The leader can say, I want this person or that person to make this decision. Now, you might assume that those individuals have those same four options. Well, they do, unless the leader puts boundaries on them. So the leader may say, and you can't delegate this. So that means if you've received that decision, you've only got three options: command, consultative, or consensus. So the leader can put boundaries on that. And I think to summarize, work on making decisions on everything that comes up on your agenda. What's next for this item? And then once you're at a decision point, I think it's always healthy and appropriate for the leader to declare at the beginning of the conversation, what type of decision is this? Because if it's a command decision, you don't even need a whole lot of conversation. Maybe the leader would provide some context, but you're not bound or obligated to do that. You can just say, we've got a level 1 decision. We got a command decision here. Let me tell you what we're going to do. And the leader can just tell the team and you can keep moving. So decision-making is a mess in a lot of organizations. And it's in some cases because they have no structured way to think about, to categorize, or to organize the decisions that they need to make.
So mastering team basics really would be if you're going to build a virtual team or any team for that matter, the basics are going to be important. That we would say
the basics.
The basics are the basics. That's right. But we would say that if you're going to do this virtually, you're going to have to think carefully about how you do that and put more energy into doing that well, as opposed to so many leaders I talk to are so frustrated. They're putting less energy into it. They're complaining about it more. And I don't think that's going to get you to where you want to go. So anybody listening, I would encourage you to really work on this, maybe twice as much as you think you need to. Because if you're going to really build a great virtual team, it's going to start with those team basics. But there's another piece, and this may be even more so something that you need to double down on. And it's the idea of building genuine community. It would be anytime you're building a team, we believe that the differentiator between a really good team and what we would call the rare air of high performance, just like you're achieving what you're capable of. It is this idea of having genuine community. And let's think about it. If you're in an office setting, you can have lunch together. You can check on something. You stop by their door. You know, how many times have I had somebody come in my office and they sit across and we talk, and you know, you can kind of shoot the breeze at the end of the day, but you also in those settings, you can get a lot of stuff accomplished and talked about. And here's what we're going to do. You can't really do that virtually unless you're, you know, on a Zoom every 5 minutes. That's not going to probably happen. And so I think when you do have those opportunities to build community, it's going to be really important. I'll give you the gauge that Mark and I've talked about through the years. We believe that when you have a meeting in a office setting, let's say it, or we're in a room together, we've always kind of give it, and as a way to divide that meeting up, 75% of the meeting is on performance management and maybe 25% on information sharing and building community and some of those kind of things. You could argue that building community is a part of you know, performance management, because when community's there, it actually goes up. So community is going to be a part of all meetings. If you're a good leader, you're thinking about how do I build a community kind of mindset here, that it's a we deal, not a me deal. You know, we're always working on the engagement of the team and trying to help people work together and collaborate and all those kind of things. I think virtually, Mark, it becomes even more challenging though. And so I let's give them a couple of ideas of things that they can do here to build that kind of community. What do you got? What would you say virtually we could do?
Well, I think to your summary, the 75-25, I'm still in the camp that 75% needs to be performance management. And in that 25%, we've historically talked about community building, training, and updates. Well, I think you've got to chunk the updates and invest more time in community. And I think to your opening comments, you're not going to run into people in the hallway, and you're not going to have lunch with them, and you're not going to do some of those other things. And so community building, more and more of that has to come into the meeting. And so where are you going to get it? I think the days of tell us what's going on in your area and people spending half a meeting doing that, which was too much to start with. I'm just saying, I don't think you can afford to spend 20% of your meeting doing that these days. I think the updates need to happen outside with email or Slack or your channel of choice, where you're letting people know what's going on. The time together is just so valuable. And I don't know about your experience. I don't want to project, but having now done virtual meetings for the last 5 years, I find that people want to make them shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And I understand the drive for efficiency. I think part of that's driven by the fact the meetings aren't that helpful anyway. So let's get through them as quick as we can. And the first thing that people want to chunk is the community building time. Now, we've referenced community a dozen times here in the last 5 minutes. You know, community as we define it is a place where people know each other, where they serve each other, and where they celebrate together. You've got to build online virtual experiences so you can know people and you can find ways to serve people and you can celebrate people. And that's going to require some energy and some thought on the part of the leader. But if you don't have the outside the meeting, and because that is the turbocharger, that's what separates good teams from great teams, you've got to be really creative to get more of that in the meeting.
Yeah. And I think just even knowing each other's story, because a lot of times when we're across the country, we haven't been bowling together. We haven't, but we've done nothing together really. We don't even know each other. And I think if we just begin to know people and know what they, where they grew up, what they're going through, what their situation is, their family, all that stuff, what they're passionate about, what their hobbies are. I mean, we can make a list here, but if we just think, well, this is virtual, I'm never going to hang out with this person anyway, it really doesn't matter that I know them. I think we're cutting our legs off at that point. We have a responsibility, if we're going to do this well, to work at that even harder, I think. I'm with you.
I think that's the theme. We're going to have to work harder here. But even that, the community building for a lot of leaders has been hard because it feels soft, and some think it feels wasteful. It is part of a performance enhancing strategy, and the data is crystal clear on that. If you can create a place where people care about their coworkers and the work, they're going to outperform those places where people just care about the work. And so for 25 years or so, any meeting that I led had some community building time on it if it was a standing team, a team that was going to work together. If you're coming together for an ad hoc meeting with a specific designated purpose, maybe there's no community building time. But if it's an ongoing team, a team that has a charter and has performance metrics and has goals, if you're going to work together over time, that was a requirement on all the teams that I led for 25 years, at least, maybe 35 years.
That's good. I'll give you the final word here, Mark. Before I do, I'll just say for me, I think the theme of this whole thing is you just said it really right there, but a higher degree of intentionality is going to be required if we're going to do this well. And I think for that leader out there who's listening, who's been complaining about this, who's been questioning this, if you don't want to use this as a strategy, that's fine. You get to choose. But if you're going to build the very best payroll that you can, this might be a good move to make. You can find people, like you said, globally even, that can help you do what you're trying to do. And I think it can be a great strategy. But if you're going to do that, don't complain about it once you make that decision. You got to put your foot on the gas and really, in an intentional way, try to do this. So that's where I would land it, Mark. Put a bow on it for us.
Well, for me, the bow is a reminder, and it's something every one of you knows, but I'm going to say it. And if you've listened to much of our show, you've probably heard me or Randy say some version of this many, many times. No team drifts to greatness. You're not going to wake up one morning and be great. No, that team has to be built, and it has to be led. And I'm just thankful that they've got you. The best is yet to come.
Yeah. Oh, what a good word. What a good word. That's awesome. All right. I hope you'll continue to share with your friends and family. More importantly, I hope you'll choose something we talked about today. If 85% of 86% of the meetings have somebody virtual, even if you have a bunch of people in a room and 1 or 2 people virtual, you can apply some of the things that we talked about today. Let's all get better. And I think if we do, it's going to make the world a better place, as Mark said there. All right. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.